to the entertaining Talkin' Sports.
What is going on, Hoops fans? Back at it with another New York Knicks video, and I'll definitely have some Knicks videos up after the playoffs once the offseason kicks in, talk a little bit about the draft, talk about the free agency, but I was kind of waiting on the announcement when the New York Knicks decided to hire their new head coach, and I don't think it's official yet. I don't think he signed anything, but it looks as if the New York Knicks have hired their newest head coach, and that, of course, being Tom Thibodeau, and we'll get into some of his credentials throughout this video. Of course, the Knicks, since I've been watching this team, have gone through a laundry list of coaches, right? I mean, when I started watching this team, they had Pat Riley. Pat Riley was a phenomenal coach. They then went to Jeff Van Gundy, who did a great job with this team. But really, since then, there's been no stability, and they've gone through a bunch of guys with a lot of credentials. Lenny Wilkins, I believe when they hired Lenny Wilkins, if I'm not mistaken, he was the winningest head coach ever in terms of, the most amount of wins. They also, hired guys like Larry Brown, Mike D'Antoni, guys that had tremendous success elsewhere, and it never fixed the problem. So no matter who the Knicks hired here, I'm not going to get incredibly excited until I start to see this team turn the corner and bring in some young players that, through the draft, which is what they've started to do. But we got to make sure that we hit on these draft picks, as the Knicks have a ton of draft picks over the next couple of drafts after the trades that they've made, and they should be picking fairly early in this year's draft, depending on how the ping pong bowls play out. But I like the Thibodeau hire. Now, there was a number of guys they could have went with. They could have went with Kenny Atkinson. Seemed to be a very popular guy amongst Knicks fans. He's known for developing young talent. The book on Thibodeau is he's a defensive-minded head coach, and that should be an endorsement to New York Knicks fans. We all know that we're a fan base that craves defense, probably more so than any other fan base in the sport. That's what Thibodeau is known for, rather. So I think that's the pro to Thibodeau. He's also had a lot of success, and we're going to get into that in this video in terms of the wins and loss department. Now, the con with him, he's not known to be a player-friendly head coach. He has a reputation for running players into the ground, namely Jimmy Butler. And that may not be a great factor when trying to acquire free agents in the future. Maybe some players don't want to come here because they don't want to play for Coach Tom Thibodeau, and that will remain to be seen. But he's known to be a bit of a disciplinarian that has scared players away possibly in the past. So that may be a bit of a con, but he's definitely going to bring a defensive philosophy to the New York Knicks. As much as we all wanted to give David Fizdale a chance and was a guy that had a reputation for being good with young talent, it just didn't work out. And I think the Knicks made the right decision moving on when they did. And Thibodeau comes with much higher credentials, and I think he could get the job done for the New York Knicks. Of course, we're still in a rebuild phase, and I think we're at least a year away before we're going to be ready to compete. But let's jump into some of the things about Thibodeau. First thing I wanted to show you guys was the story from Adrian Wojnarowski. We all know he's very credible. ESPN story on the Knicks and Tom Thibodeau finalizing terms on a 5-year deal as the Knicks head coach, and he signed a 5-year deal previously with the Minnesota Timberwolves. Now, I wanted to go over his quick coaching tree here. I'm not going to bother with the beginning. Started as an assistant with the Minnesota Timberwolves for 3 years, then went over to the San Antonio Spurs for 3 years, then to the Sixers for 3. Then he made his longest stop with the New York Knicks under Jeff Van Gundy from 96 to 2004. He then followed Van Gundy, I believe, to the Houston Rockets from 04 to 07. Of course, the Knicks had that finals appearance under Van Gundy, where he was an assistant. He then became the assistant head coach for the Boston Celtics from 2007 to 2010, in which they won an NBA championship. Then got his first job as a head coach with the Chicago Bulls from 2010 until 2015. His first year with the Chicago Bulls, the team went 62-20, and I believe that's the year that Derrick Rose won the MVP award. Rose then proceeded to get hurt. That cost the Bulls an opportunity to possibly compete to win a championship with Thibodeau as their head coach. He was never the same player, but Thibodeau did a great job, and he got the most out of a lot of the players on that team. You look at guys like Noah, Jimmy Butler, for example, wasn't a guy with the highest of expectations, became an NBA superstar, and a lot of people credit Thibodeau with that. He's a guy that gets the most out of his players, specifically on the defensive side of the court. He was the NBA Coach of the Year in 2011 and the starting head coach for the NBA All-Star Game in 2012. In terms of his accolades as a head coach, here they are. He went 62-20, like I said, his first year with Chicago. Proceeded to go 50-16, 45-37, 48-34, and 50-32. So he never had less than 45 wins as a Chicago Bulls head coach. And I remember he got a lot out of players. Taj Gibson's another player that comes to mind. got a lot out of teams that didn't necessarily have the most amount of talent. He was fired after his 5th year when I believe they got to the second round of the Eastern Conference playoffs. They lost in 6 games to the Cleveland Cavaliers and LeBron James, and the Bulls decided to move on, and a lot of that may have had to do with the fact that they felt like the players didn't get along with him very much. He then took a year off, went to Minnesota, and made the playoffs in his 2nd year there, which was only the 2nd time in the last 14 years in which the Minnesota Timberwolves made the playoffs. Now, they had some talent. They had Karl Anthony Towns, Jimmy Butler. They had some players, but he was able to get them to 47-35 in just his 2nd season in the Western Conference before moving on after just the 3rd year in which they started out 19-21 and were not living up to expectations. They decided to fire Thibodeau, and now Thibodeau finds himself back with the New York Knicks, the team that gave him his biggest opportunity in terms of being an assistant head coach under Jeff Van Gundy. And I think a lot of New York Knicks fans love and crave for the days of Jeff Van Gundy, a defensive-first basketball team. Now, it's definitely a different game than it was when Van Gundy was the coach for this basketball team. There's a lot more three-pointers. It's a much faster-paced game, but I still think we crave defense. We love defense as New Yorkers, and we love a blue-collar team, and I do think Thibodeau will bring that to the New York Knicks. What I worry about him, I think some people have a fair concern with Thibodeau, is one, will he scare away potential free agents, established players, a guy like Antetokounmpo, for example? And two, will he run these players into the ground? Will he play RJ Barrett 38, 39, 40 minutes a game and run him into the ground like he did possibly with Jimmy Butler, which was a big complaint there? That remains to be seen, but there is no doubt about it. I think the New York Knicks will come to fight every single night next year. I think they'll be a defensive-minded basketball team, and that's all you can ask. And I look for players like Mitchell Robinson to really progress under Tom Thibodeau, and hopefully RJ Barrett as well. I think Barrett could take a big step next year, and Neil Aquina may actually fit very well with a Tom Thibodeau philosophy. Other rumors I'm hearing is that Mike Woodson, who of course had some success with the New York Knicks as a head coach, may come on potentially as an assistant, and I actually like that dynamic if that's the case. We all remember that Woodson was known for spacing the basketball. The Knicks were kind of ahead of the curve on the three-point frequency. That year, I think they chucked up a record amount of threes the year that they ended up winning. I think it was 54 games that year and went on to the playoffs into the second round. And I think Woodson would be a good complement to a coach like Tom Thibodeau. You'd have a defensive-minded head coach. You'd have an offensive-minded assistant. We'll see if that's the case. We'll see if they bring Mike Woodson on. But regardless, I do like this hire. Like I said at the top of the video, though, I'm not going to get overly excited about any head coach that the New York Knicks bring on. I think we all know that the major problem with the New York Knicks starts at the top, and that is James Dolan. But hopefully the Knicks can continue to draft well. They find a good player in this year's draft, and you start to have some good young pieces, and you have a coach who could get the most out of his players. We'll have to wait and see how it all plays out, but I'm happy with the hire for now. As always, guys, if you liked what you watched, please subscribe, drop a comment, maybe give me a little thumbs up. Cheers.